County Committee of the Whole meeting scheduled for August 14, 2012. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Calling the roll, Mr. Rogers. Here. Ms. Simon.
Here.
Ms. Connolly.
Here.
Mr. Greenspan.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Brady.
Here.
Mr. Germana.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Schron.
Here.
Ms. Conwell.
Here.
Mr. Jones.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very good, thank you. The next item on the agenda is public comment related to the agenda. What we're going to do is deviate slightly from this and offer up that if there's public comment relating to the agenda in general or the process of the charter review process in general to be discussed at this time, if there is a specific agenda item that you wish to address, we're going to allow that public comment to be heard when the item is read, so the comment is relevant to the item on the agenda. So with that said, is there any public comment related to the agenda in general?
No, Mr. Chair. No one has signed in.
Very good, thank you. Before us, we have the minutes from the July 24th, 2012 meeting. I hope the committee has an opportunity to review it. If so, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made and second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes of July 24th, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, very good, thank you. Before we get started, I have a statement I want to read as it relates to the charter review process and what's been reported in the media and some statements that have been made. And hopefully this will address it, so if the committee would indulge me. I believe that experience plays a critical role in how one addresses, responds to, and resolves issues, challenges, and opportunities. Not just any experience, but relevant experience. With this said, I've had the unique honor and privilege to have served on the inaugural councils of two new charter forms of government. First, on the city of Sandy Springs, Georgia, Georgia's first new city in nearly 50 years, the seventh largest city in the state with nearly 100,000 residents. Now I serve on the charter government in Cuyahoga County, the largest county in Ohio and the 29th most populated county in the nation, a county whose population is larger than 9 states and the District of Columbia. Although I was not involved in writing either charter, I can only imagine the time, effort, and vision that it took to draft a document whose intent is to provide the framework for a new government. For that, I thank those pioneers. Their enthusiasm and commitment is greatly appreciated and respected by the respective residents and businesses of their communities. Now, specifically to those charter crafters in Cuyahoga County, I accept the sincere and heartfelt accolades in your letter to this council dated July 22nd, 2012, when you stated, and quote, "To date, both the county executive and county council have done an excellent job in restoring integrity to our government and following the provisions of the charter. If this new form of government, as illustrated in the charter, teaches us anything, you stated, quote, restoring integrity is fundamental to the foundation of rebuilding this county. Your county council passed unanimously the most comprehensive ethics ordinance in the state of Ohio and created the first county agency of inspector general in Ohio. Additionally, this county government strives to incorporate a best practices ethical stance in all of its operations. I draw specific attention to such documents as the procurement ordinance and the human resource legislation operating manuals. As you know, prior to this new government's existence, these were two areas in which some officials generally, quote unquote, lacked integrity. This council and the new government are well aware that all of our actions are under a heightened level of scrutiny and discipline, and rightly so. We understand and embrace this responsibility. Unlike the composition of this council, when I served on the council in Sandy Springs, 3 of the 7 members were active participants in drafting their charter. In addition, members of the state legislature and the equivalent of the Ohio Legislative Service Commission helped draft the Sandy Springs charter. Once drafted, it was introduced as a bill in the Georgia State House of Representatives, sent to committees in both the House and the Senate, and was voted on by the entire legislature and finally signed by the governor, all done publicly before it was placed on the ballot. As you can tell, this was a completely transparent process. Even then, after all the public review and analysis, with all the best intentions and sharp minds that crafted the Sandy Springs Charter, it was determined that charter amendments were necessary within the first year, 4 years in advance of the first charter-mandated Charter Review Commission. That council asked the same question that we're asking now. Does this proposal provide clarity to the existing charter, and does this matter rise to the level of immediate action? This council began its process as authorized by Article 10, Section 4 of the Ohio Constitution, with the same mission ultimately included sponsored proposals from all 3 branches of government, the executive, legislative, and judicial. Our process began in February and will conclude this month. To date, including today's hearings, a total of 16 public meetings have been held to discuss proposed charter amendments. This government has had 4 council meetings, 6 standing committee hearings, 4 committees of the whole, and 2 town hall-style meetings during which proposals were publicly discussed. To President Conley's credit, the credit of each council standing committee chair, this body does not prevent the open debate of ideas, unlike on other legislative bodies, and any and every proposed charter amendment was considered regardless of whether it initially met the clarity and immediacy criteria. Each item was vetted thoroughly. Many have been referred to the Charter Review Commission, and more will likely go that route. Is this not the transparency and open government that the voters adopted? The crafters of the charter in their July 22, 2012 letter acknowledged, as we realized in Georgia, that amendments would most likely be needed when they wrote, quote, "In creating this new government, we recognize that there would likely be a need for changes." This council would prefer that this charter was more clear in certain areas in which we may, and let me emphasize that no decisions have yet been made, present items to the voters in November. Based on their own individual and collective experiences with the day-to-day operations of the county's business under this charter, each branch of government brought forward proposals. There is ambiguous, conflicting, and inconsistent language in this charter, which pose challenges to operating this government in an efficient manner. It is important to note that if this council decides to present any items for consideration by the voters this November, that this process has been transparent and completely open. These recommendations are just that, recommendations to help provide a more clear operating platform for this government. Recognizing that Section 12.09 of the Charter establishes a Charter Review Commission, no action taken by this council interferes or violates the spirit of the Charter. As a matter of fact, last March, this council, under the leadership of Rules Vice Chair Dale Miller, approved rules for the Charter Review Commission with the expectation they will be able to begin work immediately upon their confirmation. Additionally, Section 12.10 of the Cuyahoga County Charter further states, quote, "Proposed amendments to this charter shall be submitted to the electors of the county in a manner provided by the Ohio Constitution." With that said, Article 10, Section 4 of the Ohio Constitution refers 3 ways in which a county may present an item on the ballot. Number 1, by a 2/3 vote of its legislative authority. Number 2, upon a petition of 8% of the electors of the county. And number 3, by a majority vote of the Charter Review Commission and then approved by the legislative body of the county. So in essence, this government is following the spirit of the charter. Contrary to the statement of, quote, "Our objections are strictly related to the process," as stated in the July 22, 2012 letter, the process provided in the charter is exactly the protocol that this government is adhering to. By statement as chair of the committee charged with this process, as a member of this council and a resident of this county, is that this body would have preferred to have the crafter of the charters engaged in the process. Their input would have been greatly appreciated, yet none was provided. The only statements made were objections to the process that were entirely within the charter itself. We have been completely consistent with the charter and the Ohio Constitution. If I am to interpret the sentiment of the July 22, 2012 letter, the crafters of the charter would have also objected to charter amendments put forward this year by 8% of the electorate of the county, an option afforded by the Ohio Constitution, because this too would have been interpreted as a violation of the spirit of the charter, since the charter specifically outlines only one method of the 3 legally permissible options. In summary, this body cannot unilaterally make any changes to the charter. Only the voters of the county can do that. That's my prepared statement as it relates to recent activities. Moving on into the matters referred to committee, the clerk will please read the first item.
Resolution number 2012-0130, a resolution providing for the submission to the electors of the County of Cuyahoga an amendment to Article 4, Section 1, and Article 5, Section 6 of the Charter of Cuyahoga County, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Very good, thank you. The author of this, the primary author of this legislation is Councilmember Simon. Councilmember Simon, do you have any comment on this?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. This amendment, I believe, meets the criteria of clarity and immediacy. I don't think there's any other amendment facing this council or future charter than this particular issue regarding the powers and duties of the law director and the prosecutor's office. This amendment I proposed is moderate. It's a moderate amendment in that it would enable the law director to represent county agencies and its officers. The prosecutor in this case would retain civil matters relating to independent boards and commissions. I believe this amendment is consistent with the desire of this council to have our own independent outside counsel. As it stands now, we would have to go through the prosecutor's office and go from a list that's prepared. This would enable this council to meet that objective. However, I believe in order to have a more global and comprehensive review of the powers and duties of the prosecutor and law director, I think it's prudent that this amendment be referred to the Charter Review Commission to enable that body to study other models and perhaps a more comprehensive overhaul of this particular system. So at this point, I would like to move this to the Charter Review Commission. Mr. Chair, if that's appropriate for this time, or this.
We absolutely can entertain that motion to move it to the Charter Review Commission. Motions have been made and second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll go ahead and we've got a member who signed in for public comment, but we will actually, probably be appropriate before we took a vote to have the public comment presented.
Okay. Mr. Dave Lambert from the County Prosecutor's Office would like to speak to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess in light of the motion to refer to the Charter Review Commission, I don't really have any comments.
Okay, very good, thank you. Okay, any other public comment related to this item?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, hearing none, a motion's been made and seconded. I'm sorry.
And now that we're in the discussion phase, I do support the concepts that I think that the Charter Review Commission will actually get a chance to review this and find out is it the appropriate method that we have in place. I believe that my colleague, Ms. Simon, has brought up some well thought out proposals and some ideas on it, and I think like a lot of these items, perhaps the Charter Review Commission is the best place for these to be heard, and I think at this point in time, so I support her in bringing and having the courage to bring this forward, and look forward to hearing the debate as we get to the Charter Review Commission.
Very good, thank you. Any other comment? Mr. Miller.
I would just also like to commend Councilwoman Simon for a great deal of time spent and for bringing forward what has to be a very important and continuing discussion. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Any other comment? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call. We'll have a roll call vote on this resolution.
Calling to roll on resolution number 2012-0130. Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Simon? Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Mr. Greenspan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Germana?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Schron?
Yes.
Ms. Conwell?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Very good, thank you. That item will join the other 6 items referred to the Charter Review Commission. Will the clerk please read the next item on the agenda?
Resolution number 2012-0131, a resolution providing for the submission to the electors of the County of Cuyahoga an amendment to Article 2, Section 2.03 and Article 3, Section 3.09 of the Charter of Cuyahoga County, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Okay, very good. Madam Clerk, has anybody signed in for public comment on this agenda item?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Schron is the author of this legislation, this resolution. Would you please provide some background and history?
Sure. During the budgetary process, one of the things that we looked on as far as the creation of our first budget was to look in terms of being able to extend into 2-year budgets and to extend the forecasting. We heard it from the county executive of the value of being able to enter into longer-term contracts for public services, being able to provide better pricing models and extensions for the benefit of those consumers who are the recipients of that, so they'd have a consistent product, and also that the county itself would be able to deal with potentially single-source suppliers. So when we looked at that and said that this is the vehicle we want to use for our budgeting process, we know that the state uses a biennial budget. The charter itself talks about an annual budget, and so as a result, to coincide our budgetary process with what the charter is asking us to do, which is to do an annual budget. It really we just want to put these two in sync, that the budget request will be biennial to match up with what our best practices are. And so I think it's fairly straightforward. It's timely. Does it fall into your emergency provisions that you were looking for? I don't believe it probably falls into the technical emergency, but it does put us in the business principles at the same place as where our budget, and we're going to be discussing budgets again in the fall. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Any other
Mr. Chairman.
discussion? Yes, Mr. Brady.
Mr. Chairman, I want to support this resolution. I think we should put it on the ballot, although it may not seem an earth-shattering resolution. It's the kind of resolution I think that's needed, and the kind of resolution that probably won't make the cut 2 years from now, because there can only be so many resolutions on the ballot at the same time. And I'm pretty sure that when the Charter Review Commission is finished, an item like this would not be one of the ones that they were recommending to go to the ballot. So I think this would be the proper year for this and a few other items possibly to go to the ballot, and I'd like to support this. And when the time is appropriate, I'd like to have my name on it as well.
Very good, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chairman, this amendment does more than just affirm what we did by ordinance. It adds clarity, improves flexibility, and makes it easier to save money through multi-year contracts. So I recommend it as well, and believe that it's the right time to move this item onto the ballot. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, hearing none. As I've said before, we make a recommendation, well, entertain a motion. Yeah, Mr. Brady seconded. So we have a motion and a second on the amendment. Yes.
I'll defer to the finance chairman in regards to this.
Mr. Chairman, I move to refer this matter to the full council for second reading.
Second.
Very good. The motions are made and seconded. Before we vote, once again, as Mr. Schron said, my general statement as we refer to these items to committee, to council, is, as we consider these, ensure that they reach the level of providing clarity to our charter and immediacy in our practices. So with that said, there being no further discussion, the motion being made and seconded, will the clerk please call roll call vote?
Mr. Rogers? Yes. Ms. Simon? Yes. Ms. Connolly? Yes. Mr. Greenspan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Germana?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Mr. Chairman, I'll vote to move this to the council, but will not support this for the ballot.
Mr. Schron?
Yes.
Ms. Conwell? Yes. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Very good, thank you. Will the clerk please read the next item on the agenda?
Resolution number 2012-0132, a resolution providing for the submission to the electors of the County of Cuyahoga an amendment to Article 5, Section 1, and Article 5, Section 4 of the Charter of Cuyahoga County, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Okay, very good. Before we call up Judge First to make the initial statement on this, I have forwarded to the committee, and they should have in front of them a letter from the Ohio Judicial Conference, as well as a package from the National Center for State Courts for your review. As we move forward with this, and just so the speakers are aware that we do have a 3-minute time limit for presentations. However, in this specific item, Judge First promised a 1-minute opening statement, and she will then defer 2 minutes of her 3 minutes to another speaker. So with that said, Judge First, if you please come forward as the author of this legislation.
Good afternoon. Greetings once again, President Connolly, Chairman Greenspan, and members of council. On behalf of my colleagues, Judge Blackman and Judge Palos, and Judges Michael Astrup, Russell Adrien, Holly Gallagher, David Mattia, John Russo, and Joan Sinneberg, thank you for hearing us today. I would like to enter as part of the record that report and the letter from the Ohio Judicial Conference, which have been submitted to each of you by email and in hard copy. You will hear public comment from Niall Ron, the co-author of the National Center report. To the extent that I don't repeat myself, I'd like to incorporate my comments of July 10th. As you know, the purpose of our visit was to enlist your support to modify a provision of the charter and ultimately place it on the ballot this November in order to correct the obvious misplacement of the clerk under the county executive appointment and direction. Simply put, we ask that the appointment and control of the clerk be placed in the hands of the courts it serves. The clerk situation presents, I gave you lots of reasons last time, but the clerk situation presents an opportunity to move in a direction consistent with the goals of efficiency and accountability and with the goals of the charter. And I will refer to Niall to expand on those pragmatic issues. Why the change now? Number one, it makes sense. Gerald First is expected to retire very shortly. To wait until 2013 or 14 for action, we will lose time to integrate and implement the efficiencies that can be found in making the change, and missed opportunities to streamline operations and realize those efficiencies, and to also to avoid any long and protracted and uncertain legal challenges which may certainly come. This situation presents a challenge of self-interest, maintaining those jobs and control by an arm of the government, which is not served by the clerk of courts, versus the institutional interest, which encourage the appointment of a new and improved clerk in sync with and accountable to the service of the courts, the bar, and the public. And we urge you to advance that. One thing that, if I may, I was not expecting to, although you may ask the question, but with respect to the challenge that Gene Kramer, who was one of the writers, saying that this was not it was not possible to make this change. I would submit that, in fact, it is very possible with an easy alteration, a provision that the court, instead of shall make the appointment, may appoint the clerk. And in this way, it can be said that the county issuing its mandate from the judicial, it cannot be said that the county is issuing a mandate to the judicial branch of government, and I'd be happy to expound on that. All right. Very good. If you have any questions, or I can come back.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right.
Madam Clerk?
Excuse me. Now we have Judge Ronald Adrien with the Cleveland Municipal Court.
To the chair, to the president of council, to the rest of the members of council, good afternoon. I know it may be a little bit out of place for me as a municipal court judge to be here to speak on this issue, but I think it's important. It's important not just to the county court, but also to us. All of us can envision a court without a clerk. I don't think that anybody can envision a clerk without a court. And I say that to say this, that historically, back in the first part of the 20th century, the clerk was disembodied from the court in order to try to give the clerk the ability to do things that the court could not. The court was governed by its canons. The clerk is not. But under the circumstances that we now find, the reasons for having a separately elected clerk, that is to say patronage, ability to speak, the so-called check, quote unquote, on the powers of the court, I would submit to you are no longer in evidence. The clerk serves only one function, and that is to serve the court. It is our record keeper. And as a result, having a record keeper that is not at our direction tends to lead from time to time to contention, not checks and balances. Those contentions that come up as a result of that, if you'll note, have not resulted in better government. As a matter of fact, if you look at all of the cases that are outstanding, what you will find is that it's just the opposite, that there have been those situations where the clerk and the court have come into contention with one another, have not furthered the best interest of the court, the clerk, or the community. When we're talking about efficiency, the best way would be to meld these together. There's a separation of powers that issue here. I think that it's important to note that there is no good justification for having the clerk report to the executive branch of government. In reality, the clerk should be a part of the court because there is no function that the clerk serves for the rest of government. And to that end, I ask that you allow this matter to go to the public and let the public finally decide. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, any other public comment?
No, Mr. Chair.
Oh.
Oh.
Okay. If you could, upon leaving, if we could have him fill out a form, that'd be great. If you could please state your name and.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, members of council, President Conley. My name is Niall Ron, and Judge first introduced me briefly. I'm with the National Center for State Courts. The National Center is a not-for-profit which was formed about 40 years ago at the urging of Chief Justice Warren Burger, who saw the need for training and development of court administration. We were asked to review the situation here with regards to the appointment of the clerk or the selection of the clerk as a technical assistance grant. Our organization provides technical assistance funding to each state, and this project was completed under that funding. Our task was essentially not a legal analysis of the situation, but was rather a review of the impact of the charter changes or the charter adoption, specifically the clerk of the court, on the role of the clerk and the impact on the court, as well as providing the court with some background on the historic and national perspective on the selection and supervision of clerks of court. Historically, court operations in this country have been somewhat diffuse. You had, in some cases, multiple officials who were responsible, independent officials responsible for clerks, clerks of court, judges, commissioners, jury commissioners, constables, and so forth. And judges pretty much, in some cases, actually rode the circuit, and the clerk, as keeper of the record, made sure the files were ready and things were set to go when the judge arrived in town or was on the bench. Since the 1970s, about the same time that our organization was formed, there's been a movement towards greater involvement by the judiciary in the management of court affairs. There has been increasing administrative complexity in the management of the courts, and I think that goes for all public organizations, government organizations. The development of court administration as a profession has grown considerably since the 1970s, just as the growth of municipal and government administration has grown, executive administration has grown as well. Nationwide, there's a wide variety of methods in which clerks are selected, but pretty much they involve either election or appointment. Within the appointment category, very few large courts across this country and most states do not have an appointment process that is the responsibility of the executive branch. I think we did our survey was in about 2005. We found about 10 states where there were still situations where the executive was responsible for appointing the clerk. Almost exclusively, these were limited to municipal courts, generally smaller courts, where the judges were also appointed by either council or appointed by the city executive, municipal executive. So they're a different kind of animal than you have here in a larger urban court. In the federal system, the clerks of courts are appointed, and the clerk position is very broadly defined and really covers all of the non-judicial activities and support services for the federal courts.
Just continue, but if you could, we're
I'll
trying.
make it very brief. Okay. Over the last couple of years since the fiscal crisis, we've been dealing with a lot of our activities at the center have involved helping courts streamline operations and also helping courts reorganize their structure to meet the challenges of reduced revenues. Our assessment, which you have in your packet, and I'll just summarize with that, really utilized a framework which was recently developed by the Conference of Chief Justices, which looks at principles of good governance for the courts. These are clear and rational governance structure that supports accountability, the ability of judges to define and delegate the administrative tasks involved in operating the courts, management control over court resources, reduce redundancies and complexities in processes, and being able to select a competent workforce on the basis of merit and qualifications. We particularly believe that the appointment of the clerk by the court itself will foster greater accountability and efficiency in the operations and is in line with the goals of the charter that you've adopted here in Cuyahoga County. Glad to answer any questions now or later. At your pleasure.
Okay, very good. I'll open the floor up to questions on this item, either questions of Judge First or of our speaker now. Are there any questions? Okay, hearing none, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time.
And you drove in from Michigan, right? Is that correct? Very good, thank you. Well, any questions from the committee on this matter? No?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to hear both sides. I see Mr. Kramer there in the audience, and of course he was one of the drafters of the charter, and I'd just like to hear his side of why this doesn't make sense. I mean, in a general way, it's a separate branch of government. We all know that. There's 3 branches. So I don't understand what the objection would be and why it doesn't make sense to go ahead with that, if we could hear from him.
Sure. Mr. Kramer, would you be willing to come forward? Great, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, it's not a matter of sides, and it's not often that a lawyer has a chance to disagree with a judge on an equal basis, so I take advantage of the opportunity. To address Mr. Giovanna's question, there really are 2 branches of a county government, executive and legislative. There is no judicial branch of county government, and that is the point that the courts are under the jurisdiction of the Ohio Supreme Court. The county is obligated to provide facilities for the courts, but could not otherwise in any way try to govern the actions of the courts. Consider, for example, if the county, either by ordinance or by charter, were to try to impose qualifications for the appointment of bailiffs by the judges, or the time when the courts are to meet and the place or the dates when they're to meet. There clearly would be interference with the court, and the court not being part of the county government. There simply is no authority, in my view, on the part of the county to try to govern those matters. Not my objections, I think they are the objections of the law, is not to the policy issue. It may make perfect sense to have the judges appoint the clerk of the courts. That's not the issue. The issue is whether this is permitted under the Constitution, because Article 10, Section 3 makes it clear that only the county officials are to be determined, and their duties and their powers and how they're selected is to be determined by the charter, not those of another branch of government, which is not even part of the county government.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Germana. Do you have a follow-on question? Mr. Kramer, you might.
No, it's not a follow-up question. Okay. It's just, I understand what you're saying. And my thought process on this is having appointed clerk of courts is certainly better than the old system of having an individual run for this county-wide. We found out with the different directors that we have in county government today, they are qualified in their positions, and they wouldn't normally be an elected person out there. So you could get the most qualified person. So regardless of who appoints the clerk of courts, I think it's much better than having a politician run for that position because of the quality of that person. So if it's possible to change this, I think the people should have the opportunity to vote, because it just seems sensible to me that the clerk of courts should be appointed by the court people, just as if we had someone else decide who our clerk of council would be. How does that make sense? I mean, it's a separate branch of government. Now, I do understand what you're saying is it's not it doesn't come under the county, it comes under the Supreme Court. But if we can do this by charter, I think we should let the people decide.
May I respond? I believe that there may be a way to address this, but I do not believe it is through a charter amendment. I believe that it might be possible to address this by going to the General Assembly and having a change in the law that could then be accounted for in the charter. But I simply do not believe that under Article 10, Sections 3 and 4 of the Ohio Constitution, this can be accomplished by an amendment to the charter. My argument is not has to do not with the policy or whether it makes sense or not. It's what the law and the Constitution permits.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this? Yes.
First had a comment.
See that, and I'll allow the judge to come up, but I do not want this to become a debate on.
If I may address exactly what, and I will reiterate what I've already stated here, if the charter could and should be permissive. That is, the charter should provide that the court may appoint the clerk. In the event the court, for whatever reason, fails to appoint the clerk of courts, the county can be given the fallback power to make the appointment. In this way, it cannot be said that the county is issuing a mandate to the judicial branch of government. There is nothing in Article 10, Section 4, that is inconsistent with this approach. This approach respects the principles of separation of powers, recognizes the special role of the courts in appointing the clerk of courts. It recognizes the legislative judgment that supervision of the clerk belongs to the judiciary, and you can look at Revised Code 230316. Finally, it's consistent with the case law in State versus McKean, in which the Ohio Supreme Court upheld a state statute that required the court to appoint its own clerk and repealed a statute that provided for the election of the clerk of the Supreme Court. And in explaining its decision, the court pointed out that local clerks of court are selected by election. The requirement that local clerks be elected, of course, was repealed in 1933. So there's nothing in the current Ohio Constitution requiring the election of local clerks, a court, or prohibiting a county charter from giving this responsibility to the judiciary. And I'd be happy to give you that. And I think that is the solution to Mr. Kramer's predicament here.
Okay, very good. So any comments regarding the judge's statements? Mr. Brady? No? Okay. Any other comments regarding this matter?
I think Councilwoman Simon had already indicated.
Okay, Mr. Brady.
I think this is an intriguing proposal, and these points are well taken from both sides. It does seem to make common sense. There may be more to this than common sense will allow, but I think that this is another one of those items that is a significant structural change to our new charter government and should be sent for a long and thorough and interesting discussion and probably some research, legal research, and I think that belongs in the Charter Review Commission, and I would move that this piece be sent to the Charter Review Commission.
Okay, so that's a motion?
It's a motion.
Very good. There's a motion on the floor.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to refer this matter to the Charter Review Commission.
A couple comments. I don't know if I can speak after this vote or before.
Well, yeah, we'll go ahead. We'll have discussion right now on the motion, and your statements can be made at that time. We've had a motion. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion?
Yes.
Yes,
I just wanted to say that amending the charter is not inconsistent with the Ohio Constitution or general law, and it's clearly a separation of power issue. It makes no sense, as Mr. Germana, Councilman Germana said, for the court to supervise our clerk. And it just, at the most essential level of the fundamentals of this country is that we have separation of powers, and the courts should be in a position to supervise and select their own clerk. I think it's fundamental. So I'm in favor of supporting this, and I just think it just really supports what this country is founded on. Every other, it's a separation of power issue, and to me that's sacred.
Very good. Thank you for your comments. Any other comments? Mr. Gallagher.
I'm with Mr. Brady. This is very intriguing and very interesting, and it's been it's kind of like watching a tennis game. But there are flaws in the proposal, but there seems to be some merit in the proposal also. But as we move forward with this, Judge Adrian, if I could ask you, are you proposing your clerk be appointed? Did he leave? It's interesting we have a court with an elected clerk making comments about a court with a proposal to appoint a clerk and supporting the appointment of the clerk. And this is, I think, just one area of where we have combating issues. So this needs to be debated further, and ultimately, I would imagine it would go before the electors if the committee recommends it. But I would support Mr. Brady in sending this to the review committee.
Very good. Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Ms. Conwell.
I'm in favor of the separation of powers as well, but the issue before us today is, should we send it to the voters, or should we vet it out more with the Charter Review Commission? So I'm more, this is a big issue, so I'm more moving towards sending it to the Charter Review Commission.
Very good. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, there's been a motion. The motion's been seconded and debated. Clerk, please call the roll on the motion.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Simon?
No.
Ms. Connolly?
Wait, would you repeat the word of the motion, please?
We're voting to defer to the Charter Review Commission.
Yes, to send to the commission.
Mr. Greenspan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Germana?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Schron?
Yes.
Ms. Conwell? Yes. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Motion carries 10-1.
Very good. Thank you. That motion carries.
Mr.
That'll be the eighth
Chair.
item referred to the Charter Review Commission. Yes, Mr. Fitzgerald.
I just want to make one comment on the motion that just passed, and that is in the period of time then that will follow from this point in time until through the whole deliberative process of the Charter Review Commission. There will be a philosophical discussion about what the appropriate role of government is or what the separation of powers demands. There should also be, and maybe this was mentioned, I'm sure it was mentioned in some way before I got here, there should also be a parallel discussion about just efficiency and statistical support in terms of what we've done with the clerk's office for the period of time that it's been run under the executive's office, because we also have financial decisions to make. Now, I'm not saying that trumps other legal or philosophical or balance of power or separation of power issues, but I think it's going to be relevant. The good thing is that working with Judge First and the other representatives of the court system, we've started to lay a statistical foundation in terms of comparing information, using our county stat process to measure what the clerk's office does, what the courts do, and I hope that if we have and I believe we will, have a very robust kind of statistical analysis over the next few months, the council is going to have, and the Charter Review Commission is going to have, not just an opportunity to balance the philosophical or legal arguments, but also the economic and efficiency arguments. So I think that'll be our job to help provide that.
Very good. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is miscellaneous business, and although nothing has been formally presented to this committee, there are 4 charter items that have been referred to council for possible consideration to be placed on the ballot. And I'll open up the floor at this time. If there are any council members that wish to discuss, we cannot take any action on any of those items, but to discuss any of the 4 proposals that will be before us this evening. Mr. Schron?
Yes. There is one that's that's being considered to go forward to the voters, and that involves the border revision and the changes. And as we have come across as the very first meeting that we had on the evening as we transitioned, we knew that the border revisions was going to be one of the areas that needed delicate and but effective focus. And so we as a council came up to speed on this very quickly and identified that there were some mechanical problems that we thought that needed to be addressed in the border revisions, and some of the changes that have been suggested in there, and I would wholeheartedly support those mechanical changes as being brought forward by my colleague, Mr. Miller. There is also in the current piece that's being reviewed and considered for going before the voters is a structural change, and that structural change is one in which the original charter had a party affiliation as part of the makeup within that structural change of the way that was put forth. And just as we just deferred on a change of the nature on the clerk of courts and on another significant matter, that being on the way the law director's position and the prosecutor's position are balanced out, to change the element that has political party affiliation, incorporate into this piece, and of course it's incorporated into other parts of the charter, and to only change this one section as it goes before the voters, I believe that we should, this evening I will submit an amendment that we just pull that piece out and send that to the Charter Review Commission to review whether or not it's appropriate, even though the voters put forth that, if we put it forth by knocking that out, it had not gone through the venting of the Charter Review Commission. I wholeheartedly support all the other structural changes, but I will be making an amendment that piece would be sent to the Charter Review Commission to analyze and look at whether or not party affiliation should be removed from those considerations as we go forward. The other aspect that I'll be discussing this evening is there will not be another appointment for these positions for almost 2 years. So it will be a moot point as we worry about whether or not there's going to be any appointments taking forth. They won't be taking place. The Charter Review Commission will have plenty of time to decide the validity of whether or not they should or shouldn't be in there before the next round of appointments come forward. So I think that, again, like we have done on so many other important pieces, that we think that it's not just changing the structural aspects of what we're doing here on the border revisions, but this is actually changing one of the core functions within there, and we ought to push this over to the Charter Review, let that have a full venting, and then go before the voters as a separate item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Specifically speaking to this amendment and this resolution.
Yes, I can't submit it as an amendment at this time. I understand that.
Right. Yeah, nothing can be submitted. This is merely for discussion on this item. Is there any other discussion? I agree with Councilmember Schron as has been stated on this specific item. Obviously, there are some structural issues within the charter as it relates to the border revision, and we'll go over those later this evening. But I agree that to surgically at this time remove a fundamental theme throughout the charter as it relates to party affiliation, because this is not the only location in the charter which party affiliation is listed, I believe, is not in our best interest. So I would be supporting this amendment, as I've stated in the past. If it's the intent to start removing party affiliation, then let's just remove it with a machete instead of with a scalpel, meaning remove it entirely from the charter, including our own positions and of the executive and the prosecutor.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Brady.
With all due respect, I've heard these discussions many times now. It's not new to us. I think I'd rather talk about it now in a less formal way than this evening, repeating myself. This to me, whether it means to or not, injects politics into the process rather than remove it. It's not, I don't think, in the spirit of the original resolution, not wanting to speak for the sponsor, which has a whole different purpose to it, but we know the problem, repeating again, we know the problem we ran into when hiring people for the Board of Revision was based on a party affiliation. I think this goes back to an earlier era in partisan politics in this community and many other communities that we've gotten beyond. And I find it frankly striking that the chairman of this committee is from the minority party. All members of this council that are from the minority party chair committees, important committees, have passed resolutions, have had an incredible impact on the direction of this council from time to time. We almost never have, partisan debates, and for icing on the cake, Mr. Wade has one of the most important responsibilities and wide-ranging responsibilities in county government, and is a former Republican public official. I believe we have something closer to a coalition government than anything I've ever seen anywhere. And so I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, but I think that we should send this to the out later on when we discuss it. I will be sending this to the ballot as is, and removing any party affiliation as part of this legislation.
Very good. Any further discussion on this item? Yes, Mr. Gallagher.
A question to Mr. Schron. Mr. Schron, basically your amendment takes us back to where we were, no?
As to that one component, that's correct. And so therefore, that one element would then be applicable to go to the Charter Review Commission to review it.
And that goes to the heart of my concern with those boards, this is exactly where the problem was. And by doing this, that's how we got into where we are at, and that was the trouble. So I can't support going back to the problem, and I certainly can't support the way we had. I liked what I had in having some political balance somewhere within this charter amendment, and I thought at the top as opposed to at the committee level down below would be proper. But this to me is exactly what I was trying to fight, actually.
All I'm doing is returning it to, matter of fact, leaving it where it is, because my concern is when we get to the ballot, we will have no longer a discussion on the mechanics of what Mr. Miller's core part, if you recall, it was not in his original draft. This was not in to take this out of his original draft. He wanted the core components to be fixed in the Board of Revisions. This will allow the arguments to be circled around fixing the mechanical pieces that we have a problem with. If the board of, as far as the Charter Review Commission looks at this and says they agree with you, I have no problem with it. I have no problem with Mr. Brady if they agree with it. It just is separating those functional pieces that we want to correct with the Board of Revisions, and this piece, which does carry a political piece with it. And I agree with you 100%, Mr. Gallagher, but I think that it's better to have the Charter Review Commission come out with that point of view than it is to this council, and we can stay on the focus of let's fix the mechanical pieces. It's not going to come up for another, there's not going to be another appointment before the Charter Review Commission would make that decision.
Well, we would
fixing something that doesn't carry out another vote in that length of time.
Right. We've had vacancies. I mean, that unfortunately has occurred. But again, I appreciate your efforts in this, but this goes to the core of the problem of what I consider the problem, and I'm not certain that taking your steps are really going to get us to where we need to be. I understand going to the Charter Review Commission, but I would actually show up and argue against this at the Charter Review Commission.
And I don't disagree that I might be on the same side with you on that particular point of view. The question is whether it's our purview on that this component, or whether it's their purview.
Very good. Any further discussion on this specific proposal? Okay, hearing none, I'll just open the floor up. Are there any other items related to charter amendments, proposed charter amendments, that we will be discussing this evening that anyone wishes to discuss today? Okay, hearing none. Is there any other public comment?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, very good. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion's made. Is there a second? We are adjourned.
time to kill, Drea.
I got plenty.
I'm gonna leave.
I got plenty of stuff to do.